Good morning. Welcome to Quantum's Liberty Day 25. There's some water. Hope this day's finding you well. This morning on the phone, we have Robert. He's a 10-year-old, and he's actually from Jalisco, Mexico. So, good morning, Robert. We were talking yesterday. We have an interesting situation that he had in his family. And it's a little sad, too. This was a situation that involved a miscommunication of a very important issue. It is involving COVID-19. So Robert's uncle did not know that the coronavirus was could be spread through being in close contact without a mask or hand washing. He didn't know any of that that we as a society really do know right now, most of us, when we're paying attention to the recent credible science. Now, as a critical care nurse for 34 years and an Ebola fighter, I took a class, it was about 8 hours a couple weeks ago, and the recent science is that it's really comes down to three things. You just don't want to give it, you don't want to get it, and it's airborne and dangerous. So what we talked about was that had his uncle known that he could have worn a mask and washed his hands and did the 6 feet social distancing, then he may have not contracted the virus and died from it at the age of 40. So we were talking about, how scary that is, that his family and his culture and his community did not know this very important piece of news that had they known it, they would have not had their uncle die. So we talked a little bit about the immune boosting effects of Quantum's Liberty, of the tapping, and also a little bit about the science. So let's start tapping, Robert. And we're not going to repeat after me quite yet, because we're just going to start on the tapping, and I'm going to talk with you a little bit about what those questions that you had yesterday, which were really good and had me thinking quite a bit. So when I did a little bit of thought about, how do you get a community to all understand and know that this is what will work for everybody. And so one of the things that he talked about was that his family, in his family, his dad's dad or the grandfather's dad would say, your mom's stupid and things like that. And so when she was coming home with this research, the dad's dad just automatically did what his dad's dad did and said, oh, that's not, that's nothing to listen to. So I was thinking about, well, in that case, you really need to just go inside, and you are part of an evolution of consciousness, which is that, you can see those kinds of patterns and just say, well, does that apply to me? Is that something that works for me in my life? And so there's a developmental biologist. His name is Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. And he's a developmental biologist who brought Morphic field idea to the forefront. In his book, let me think, it's called A New Science of Life. And so his idea was that we have consciousness fields, and this is at the level of quantum mechanics, and these fields can affect the development of any of the members that are connected to that field. And how this works is that there's a group of cells, and they are able to respond to localized biochemical signals. And I believe this is called the BRCA in the brain. So, and then that response to the local biochemical signals then leads to the development of a structure or of organs. And we can think of a structure, keep on tapping in nice deep breaths, we can think of a structure as a structure like, you know, the dad saying to the dad, well, your mother's stupid, and then that dad saying to that dad, you know, one, your mother's stupid, and so that's a structure. It's not necessarily a structure that you can see, but you can see it because it happens in front of you. So that's an energetic movement, right? It's a bunch of cells that are saying, oh, this is the way it is. And literally all those kind of structures, when you adhere to them, they don't really lead us to liberty and freedom. So when we tap on this point right here, that's why I have you tapping on this, what this does is that sends a signal. It blocks the flow of neurons to the amygdala. And not completely, but it really inhibits it. So you can have this image in your brain, right, that says, oh, this is the way it is. But really, that's a limitation, because then that doesn't allow for the listening to the science that the mother has, and that, you know, she might have been able to say to the family, well, I heard that you're supposed to wear a mask and this is how it is, and then the whole family would have not listened to that structure in place, right? And they would have listened to the mother, and his uncle would be alive, possibly. So we talked about, you know, how to block that structure from being so solid. And one of the things is to know that there is a resistance. It's just to feel inside of your body or your mind or your heart. Feel inside your heart. I actually have this heart monitor on today. So I was like, oh, that thing. So you feel inside your heart and listen inside of you. And does that structure saying, oh, your mother is stupid, does that lead you to feeling a sense of peace and well-being and joy inside of you? Does that give you a feeling of bliss? Well, if it doesn't, then it might be something to tap on. And so the tapping, what that does is it blocks the flow of neurons going to the amygdala, which is your fight or flight system. And that fight or flight system helps you to run from the structure. Keep on tapping. But what it also does is it helps to, within a second of it happening, where you have this idea, oh, that's not quite right. Something's not quite right with that, right? That structure isn't quite right. And so within a second of that, cells are starting to fire to the amygdala and telling you, run from that. And when that happens, the capillaries in your prefrontal cortex, which is your self-awareness area, those capillaries constrict by 70%. That means the oxygen is not going to that prefrontal cortex area, but instead it's flooding down to the arms and legs, where you can run like a caveman from the danger. And nowadays, we don't necessarily, sometimes we do have to run from danger, but not necessarily do we have to run from danger all the time. And so what this does, tapping on the side of the hand point, is that slows down that flow to the amygdala. And so the oxygen then can stay in the prefrontal cortex, where the capillaries remain at their nice dilated level, and you will have that flow going to the brain, so that you can think about the next right action to do, which might be saying, well, maybe that's a judgment, Dad, you know, maybe that judgment is not correct. Maybe it is correct. But why don't we look it up online? Why don't we go to some reputable science like the CDC? The World Health Organization has about 17 sites that are all free, and you can look up information on what is the latest data that people are doing around the world to limit the coronavirus spread in their communities. And so what we are doing is we are wearing masks. That's shown to be very effective. In particular, actually, cotton and silk are good materials because they have a positive charge, and the coronavirus has a negative charge on its outer membrane, so it acts like a magnet and repels. So doubling up on cotton or silk is the best, or fairly effective. And then also distancing 6 feet apart, and the virus has a lipid-soluble membrane, so when we soap our hands really well for 20 seconds, then that will also help to break down the lipid-soluble membrane of the virus and prevent the spread somewhat. So another thing that we can do to help to break down structure, you know, beliefs that might not necessarily be serving you, is an idea that in Quantum Doctor, a Physicist's Guide to Health and Healing, Dr. Amit Goswami, I think it's page 12, let's see what page, oh yeah, here it is, page 62. So what he talks about in this book, keep on tapping, is that, and actually let's go to the other points too. So tap on the inside of the eye now. Dr. Amit Goswami talks about a science experiment outside the eye in which a monk was attached to a PET scan which measures the glucose flow across the neurons, jumping from one to the next. Whenever a thought occurs, then the glucose travels across the neurons and the PET scan goes click, right, under the nose. And then they put in an empty room, a vacuumed room, void, right, a single photon or an electron. And so when the electron, it has quantum properties, so it has both chin point, it has both wave properties, and it also has particle properties. So that's what quantum consists of. And so when it's in a wave form, there's an endless field of possibilities where that electron could be in the room. That's a collarbone point under the arm. And then when it's in particle form, it actually has mass. So that means it emits a radioactive wave when it has mass. And then the Geiger counter will go click, top of the head. So they found that if the monk had emptied his mind completely of thoughts, which this trained monk could do, then the PET scan made no noise at all inside the eye. But when the monk had a thought, he would be able to emit the glucose would travel on the neuron, and so the PET scan would go click. So what happened in this replicable experiment under the eye was that every time the monk had a thought, the electron is there, then the Geiger counter and the PET scan would go click. And the idea behind that was that the monk actually was creating a thought, and that thought had an impact on the electron, which made no noise at all until the monk had a thought. And then in that point, the electron no longer was in the field of infinite possibilities, but it had a place in space, according to the monk. The monk would think the electron's there, and it would go click, and the PET scan and the Geiger counter would both go click. and all other fields of possibilities would fade away, and that's called downward causation. And so that's what it kind of looks like. So Robert, what we want to do is we want to have the idea in your mind, right, that you have health. We want to do the things that we're supposed to be doing according to science, but we also want to, and we also know that the tapping, it will boost your immune system. So if you have an overactive immune system, do not do the tapping. But 1 week of tapping and meditation, or 10 minutes a day, will increase your immunoglobulin levels 113%, and also lower your cortisol levels 37% in 1 week of tapping and meditation. So you will be feeling much, much, much better. Not only because the flow of oxygen isn't going down and away from your prefrontal cortex, but just because of the overall impacts of the immune system. So this is really exciting neurochemistry, and it's happening right here in your body while you're doing the tapping. So let's tap on first. We'll tap on any resistance that we have to perfect radiant health, right? So we're going to tap for immune boosting, and we'll also tap on the idea that we have power, and that when we're all connected to this field, like we were talking about, like there can be a structure where, and it's true, the coronavirus does impact the Hispanic and the Black population more so than say the white population. And I'm not sure about the Asian population about that, but it seems like skin color, and I don't know if that has to do with melatonin or what it is, because we actually do give people melatonin for coronavirus health. So that's a little bit odd to me. But anyway, so what we'll do is we'll just tap on any resistance that we have to radiant health. And we will then tap on the idea of deserving this radiant health, and also then bring in the idea that I am that radiant health. Okay, so first round will be, and you can do this at home whenever you want to. Just say, even though, so now we'll repeat after me, and we'll do this setup statement, tapping on the side of the hand 3 times. And you can fill in the blank anytime with something that you're feeling at that time. So let's start with, even though, repeat after me, good. And thanks for bringing this up, Robert. This is really powerful. Even though I have this silly notion, repeating after me, great, that that is a judgment that caused a great deal of harm in my family, I deeply and completely love and accept and forgive and trust myself exactly as I am. Even though I had this silly notion that was given to me by a bunch of people that had a very negative impact in my family, I deeply and completely forgive, trust that I have my own back, I accept myself fully, exactly as I am. Even though I had this notion that I wasn't doing enough, I deeply and completely forgive and love myself exactly as I am. This structure that was in my community, this belief system that did not work. I have cells in my brain that can send better signals to the development of better structures that will protect my community. I am a conscious being, and I can affect the development of these cells utilizing new science so that we are able to respond to this pandemic in a healthy and creative way with self-awareness and lots of oxygen flooding to my prefrontal cortex and lots of happy neurotransmitters and hormones to make me feel way better and feel the bliss and this exciting neurochemistry right here in my body. I am that radiant, healthy person. I see that radiant, healthy being. I visualize myself in radiant health. I am speaking in radiant health. I am listening in radiant health. I am walking in radiant health. I perceive and believe with radiant health. With or without coronavirus in my community, I am in radiant health, in mind, body, and spirit. Deep breath in. Thank you so much for bringing that up.